My name is Malcolm Rowland, um, Malcolm A. Rowland, muralist, craftsman, chief operating officer at Yendor. My father's name is Kim Johnson, but his attribute was Khalil.
My name is Hans Lundy. I'm a muralist, illustrator. I'm also the project manager for Yendor. My father's name is Gene Hans Lundy. Um, but when we were back in Haiti and stuff like that, he was mainly known as Hans.
To be very honest, I wanted to do something centered around fatherhood for maybe two years, and I just couldn't find the right project to do it. So I could kind of just shelf the idea. Um, sometimes the conversation around black men isn't always like the most timely thing, right? And it's not the most fundable thing. So to figure out where that narrative fits, I really had to figure out where that narrative fits in so many words professionally. But the city reached out wanting some artwork for Riviera Hotel, and they kind of let me in on what was going to happen with the building and how it was going to be um, revitalized. So that the idea of that kind of like drummed up some conversations that we've been having internally at Indoor, and I was like, okay, I think this may be like the right time to try to work in this fatherhood narrative. So that's basically how that came about.
You know, when it comes to like murals or any depictions of like what is beautiful, what is appropriate, and everything like that, there's this like fear sometimes that is put when you see like a black man on a wall, and I don't know what it is, but you don't see a lot of like murals that has like something that's talking about fatherhood, that's talking about like that has a good depiction of a black man, not a black and white, not a Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, but like the everyday black man working. Like there's a big there's an energy behind it that isn't sometimes like appreciated. And I think that is one big thing that we wanted to really like push forward when it comes to this mural. And we're grateful that we had the opportunity to even be able to do that.
So for me, like when I think about fatherhood, I think of my grandfather, right? He's like the patriarch of my family, right? And he kind of instilled these like morals and ethics in all of the young men in my family that last way past his passing. His funeral, like the celebration of his funeral, was on 20th year just yesterday, right? And it's my uncle's birthday, right? Who is like the oldest male in my family. So those influences trickle down from my grandfather to my uncle to the rest of us, and that's like what I think of like fatherhood, right? Like a head of household or like structure, familiar, like that type of thing. Um, but there's a flip side to that of like I had really good mentorship, right? And the mentors in my life came in all different shapes and forms, but they were really good fathers. Some of them were single fathers, some of them were married, some of them were separated and like working through divorce and all that type of stuff. But through all of those like trials, life trials, they still kind of stuck really strong to being present in their children's lives, right? And if they weren't present, they always talked about the realities of why they weren't and what they were trying to get back to or trying to connect with. So when it comes to my own father, it was always this weird disconnect of like I've been around men my entire life. I grew up in entrepreneurship. I grew up in construction. I grew up in the streets just a little bit, right? And I always got a real perspective of manhood, and it just me and my father never connected because I'm watching other men's story of like redemption, and he didn't have the same struggles, right? And he also didn't have the same disconnect. So our conversations always felt like they went like this. You know what I mean? Because it's like I'm giving grace, but you don't have a mission with your absence, right? So there's a bit of like just miscommunication. I just never got corrected, but we did have some type of relationship at the end of his life. He passed away in 2021, and you know some things were said in the hospital that like some things were said before he went to the hospital, but it's still like it's kind of I guess like a driving force in a way that I parent.
My background with my father, is a little bit distorted in a way. So I come from Haiti. I came here when I was 9 and everything like that. And my parents decided to send us over here, which was a great decision because at the time Haiti was very chaotic. Couldn't go to school, couldn't really work, a whole bunch of stuff. So we were sent over here. My parents didn't really come to my father specifically because my mother came first. My father didn't come until I was maybe towards the end of my middle school. So I was like in eighth grade or something like that. And my perspective on it is, to sum it up, is just survive, right? My father had a thing when it came to, like, he always wanted a daughter because he didn't know how to necessarily deal with like a son, and then you could just like tie that back into like his relationship with his father and everything like that. So there was always that thing between us, and we kind of like butted heads. But it's not to say that he didn't love me or show me love or anything like that, but like there was a certain like thing between us that always was amiss, right? Until like I got older and he started like viewing me as like a friend. So now like when we talk, it's more so like I'm talking to my boy, you know what I'm saying? So but I will say, like, growing up, my perspective of him was just survive, because he worked, he came home, he did what he needed to do. But all I saw from him, and also the other men that was like in the house, because it was my aunt, whole bunch of cousins and everything like that, is everybody was just on straight survival mode. So now translating that to like how I am as a man, I of course adopt that mentality, but it doesn't work in every space. When I'm thinking about my relationship, or when I'm thinking about like how I'm going to deal with my kid, you know what I'm saying? Because survival mode works, but it doesn't apply to everything. Yeah. So I'm always inspired by where I come from, right? Haitians are known to be loud. Haitians are known to just taking over a room sometimes, whether they're wrong, right, or different. But there's a certain type of energy that the culture has, right? And another thing that like I learned when it came to like Haitian art, it always depicts something that is not really there, right? So it depicts, like, if you see like a landscape, you'll see the cows, you'll see the chickens, you see a whole bunch of greenery, you'll see families coming together. It's not necessarily the truth of the culture, but it's what we would want. When it came to like the especially for Audible, that's the main mural that's popping in my head. Especially for Audible, we talked about our culture differences and similarities a lot, and how it just like intertwines in a lot of ways. And that is like really like kind of like the driving force behind it. Like I try to push my culture as much as I can when it comes to our work, whether if it is from the color or whether from the expression. That's mainly where it comes from. Yeah.
For me, color is everything, right? It defines the emotions of the mural. It also defines the world that the mural lives in, and it also redefines the world that the mural finds itself in, right? So murals are something that we use for change. It's something that people put the title creative placemaking on things, but it's really to invoke change in that neighborhood, right? So for this mural, it was about redefining masculinity in so many creative words symbolically, right? So instead of it being like this is a man and children, right, and making those colors very masculine, dominant, and brooding, right? We really took the time to make them almost feminine, right? To make them softer, and not femininity like woman, but like nurturing, right? So we use soft tones with the blues. We use very soft purples and violets, right? Those things were intentional, and we just added yellow and teal just because those are our signature colors. But and it was to signify inspiration and sunlight and that type of thing. But the rest of those hues were to really invoke the conversation around like redefining masculinity in like the black community, right? Not just Newark, right, but just blackness as a whole, right? Like sometimes we get so caught up on what we thought a man was in 1950 that we miss what's going on right now, right? So I think fatherhood comes in all these shapes and forms, right? Sometimes it's like I said, sometimes it's mentorship. Sometimes it comes through your uncle. Sometimes it comes through your cousin, right? Sometimes it comes through your older brother. So we kind of wanted to add those little hints of things. I don't even think it's beyond access, right? I think it is access. It's your first accessible style of art or type of art or genre of art, right? So let me first say that this was a special project for Mayor Ras Baraka, right? That's it. It's a special project, right? It's something that would not exist without it being a special project and having emphasis on artwork meeting development, right? Artwork meeting change, right? Because artists are change makers. We're the first ones to jump out and to point at the things the ills of the world, right? So that is why we do this, right? It's like communities like the South Ward are like the very ends, not downtown, but the very ends of the Central Ward, right? The West Ward, they don't have access to art, right? And I know the mural program has been going on for years, right? But we don't have consistent access to arts, right? We don't have consistent access to art programming. We do a lot of things here in the city of Newark to like create that feeling, but we really don't have those institutions. They don't stretch beyond downtown, right? And that's an infrastructure thing. Most cities don't, right? So it's going to take a lot of work to get that to happen, right? And not saying it's not work happening now to make that happen, but it takes a lot of work to stretch that beyond the downtown, right? And I think murals are one of the most judicial ways to do it, right? They are the ones that are riding out in the cavalry first, muralists, right, to go in the neighborhoods and to create something that represents the people there, but also represents the artist's intentions, right, but also connects to a broader conversation, right? And that's why I do it. I know that, that's why he has come to Yendor. It's like we want to create something that's valuable to not just ourselves, but to the community, to the residents around the spaces that we recreate. But we also want something that's timeless too, right? And we want something that's big, right? So, and I mean big in terms of impact. How does this change the space? How does this make people feel about where they live? So that's, I'm big on that.
And just to piggyback on what he's saying too, another part that like I know the public don't really get to really see unless you're in these type of rooms and hearing the conversation is the actual work that is being done to actually figure out what the community wants, right? Whenever I think of public art, it's we're kind of like the middleman between the institution and the community. You know what I'm saying? Because like the thing that people don't see is us actually, getting like having community meetings, getting the input, hearing the things that the community's complaining about, the things that they do like, the things that they want to see, the things that they actually care about outside of the political standings of whoever's in charge and everything like that. And our job is literally to take all those ideas and be able to express them, and so that they can be, reminded like, the city cares and everything like that. But that job within itself is so crucial sometimes, because then we could go back to whatever the institution, be like, they like this mural idea, but they've been kind of like complaining about the park and they need something to make it look more live so the kids can have a good time or a situation like that. I think that is also the big component of why we do public art and why is it so important in urban cities and really everywhere. And especially with, like Malcolm was saying, like the South Ward, it doesn't get that much love when it comes to murals. And for us to be able to do a project where it's talking about a heavy subject like fatherhood, a complex subject like fatherhood, it was a very big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just to piggyback off what Hans was saying, we like here at Yendor, we're making a really big effort not to create murals that just celebrate figureheads in our community, right? Like I can't say, like I've been trying to say this every interview I can, of just like it's important to connect history to what is being created, because people need to know who paved the way, but it's also important to create artwork that just reflects everyday life. We don't do a good enough job of that here because we're always trying to tell a story and commemorize a thing or a person, but it's also very important that artwork just reflect where it is, right? So on the mural, there's two children, there's hands, there's all these things that are just everyday people things, whether you're black, white, this, that, it's everyday people things, right? Now it's through our lens because we are black, we are, we come from the diaspora, all of that stuff, but it's very important that they like, it's not the head of the fire department on the wall, right? That is just, it's just a construction worker, right? Those things matter, right? Because you want people to be able to really see themselves in the artwork. So that is like a big point for us. In the end of the spring, early summer, I would like to do some activation stuff around the mural. And I just been around trying to figure out the financials behind it, right? But yeah, I want to do way more activations in the space because it is a vacant lot. It is kept by the city and the housing authority. So I want to be able to use that space. And then also the space is a house for those in transition, right? So, the city of Newark's been doing a great job with combating homelessness, right? And helping those without addresses, right? And that space is another space for that type of work. And I think there are some resources that can be brought to that population, and I think activations and like experiential things is the way to go. I also think that community, because it sits on this weird in between downtown, in between the South Ward, doesn't get enough resources, right? People talk about crime in the city of Newark all the time, right? But the places that crime happen the most are the places that are not touched in terms of visibility, right? In terms of access, right? Access to groceries, access to transportation, right? Access to parks. Those things matter. So I think the more activations you bring in those quote unquote blank spaces, you can kind of combat the community ills, if that makes sense, and bring attention to the space, right? Because those corners can be forgotten, right? We talk a lot about the number blocks. We talk a lot about Clinton Avenue. We talk a lot about South Orange Avenue, but that Spruce Street, Quitman Street, it gets lost a little bit because it seems downtown, but it's not downtown.
So everybody knows the mural as the fatherhood, but the actual name of it is Enfants de Divinite, so which means children of divinity in French and Creole. Yeah.
Which is like, it's a nod to Father Divine owning the Riviera Hotel and the history that he brought to not just the city of Newark, but Newark, Harlem, Brooklyn, Detroit, Philadelphia, right? If you do some research, Father Divine had the same impact that Elijah Muhammad would have, right? And my family used to participate in the Peace Corps. I have great aunts who were a part of the Peace Corps. My grandmother remembers going to all of the dinners at the hotel. So we just wanted to make sure that whatever we did, we still did a little nod to the history that we know exists, right? Because some of that stuff is getting erased as the city develops. There's no real conversations about kind of like our own civic duties to the city through our own like religious enlightenment as African American people in just America. And some of those stories of Noble Drew Ali or Father Divine or like Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, some of those things are getting lost in some of this, and it's just good to have some artwork that nods back to it, that we can kind of have those conversations again.
Yeah.